I was thinking the State Department and, you know, how everything's happening right now, and just, so service is something to think about. There's so many opportunities that are available, but sometimes we get so sucked into the specific point or a specific like career path that we don't think really about the outside or what's possible beyond this kind of given opportunity or this idea that we have. So this is more like an informal panel or kind of conversation that we hope to have. I have some guiding or leading questions that can just have you like introduce and talk about your experiences, and then I hope our peers can ask some questions too, because I'm sure they will have a few as long as you guys have as you guys share your experiences as well. So I guess we can start off with like an introduction and what you did post-grad and where you are right now.
I can start us off. Hi everyone, my name's Inez. I actually went to BC undergrad. I was an IS major, so I was sitting in your shoes not too long ago. I'm originally from Puerto Rico, and after BC, I decided to do a year of service through a program called Amate House, which is based in Chicago. So they only have a location in Chicago, and it's about 4 to 13 people every year. And while I was there, I worked for Catholic Charities, which is a nonprofit that exists in the US and beyond. And I worked at 5 different Chicago public schools as an after-school mentor running a social emotional learning program on the south side of Chicago. And I really enjoyed that.
Hi, my name's Tess. I graduated from the International Studies program in 2019. And then after graduation, I joined Teach for America in Professor Owen's hometown, Nashville, Tennessee. I lived there I ended up being there for like 3.5, 4 years, but I did TFA for 2 years and then continued teaching afterwards. I taught 6th grade social studies and ELA. And I think I just want to clarify that while I do consider Teach for America and like teaching a service-oriented profession, I was getting paid as a full-time employee. And then on top of that, you are part of AmeriCorps, so then you're also getting that stipend to get your certification and then your licensure. And then afterwards, I moved back to Massachusetts. I'm from Massachusetts. I got my degree in education policy from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and now I'm working for the State Department of Education as an accountability data specialist. So for those of you that don't know about accountability, and I can speak more to this, I basically work with measuring school quality, so how our schools are doing and districts are doing in the state of Massachusetts.
Hi, I'm Marcus Bockhorst. I also was an IS grad in 2019. Then I went to Los Angeles and did JVC, the national program, and was at a nonprofit out there called the LA Center for Law and Justice. It was a legal clinic that mostly worked with survivors of domestic violence, and also because of the clientele they dealt with, they had an offshoot of the clinic that did some immigration work as well. After that, I came back to Boston, was at the U.S. Attorney's Office here for a while as a paralegal, went to law school at Northeastern after that, and just graduated from Northeastern in May, and I'm off to a law firm starting Monday actually. So
Congrats.
Yeah.
Congratulations. So I guess the first question will be like, how did you decide that you wanted to engage in service? What kind of prompted you to this path that you took right after graduating from BC?
Do you want us to go in
Any
order?
way you want. I mean, we can start with you if that's just easier.
Sure. So I had never really heard about a year of service until I would say probably like maybe junior going into my senior year of college. I kind of looked into it. COVID did kind of put a halt to a ton of programs, so they were still kind of getting back on their feet when I was looking into like what kinds of programs I was interested in. But I had done a lot of service opportunities at BC, so I really enjoyed the Pulse program. And I was ethics and social justice through the IS program, and I really enjoyed kind of like the perspectives that those classes and that concentration gave me, and I knew that I wanted to engage in something where I could kind of like take a step into something that was beyond the BC bubble, and be able to put some of what I'd learned and what I'd seen into a little bit more practice. And to me, it was really important to have like an intentional community. Like that's what I was really looking for outside of moving beyond BC. And I think that's another thing that really attracted me to doing service, was not just the idea of being able to like go into a new community and see like how I could serve and like be helpful, but also to be with a group of people that had that same set of values and intentions of wanting to be people for others. So that's a little bit of my reason.
For me, very similarly, I did a lot of service-oriented, like extracurriculars and classes here at Boston College. I did Pulse. I was an economics concentration, but I believe it was called Faith, Peace, and Social Justice as a minor, so I took a lot of classes. That kind of really sparked my curiosity for what I could do post-grad that was like engaging with some sort of social good. And I think as someone that studied economics, I kept thinking about all of these factors in society that are leading to some sort of inequity. I kept coming back to this idea of like education being one of the first, opportunities that someone has in order to like break some sort of inequity and create economic mobility. So for Pulse, I was a preschool teacher in Boston, and I just always in the back of my mind thought teaching might be something that I'd be interested in and something that I would be good at. And it made me feel, I felt like I could really help someone understand something, and I had that opportunity here at Boston College when I was explaining something to someone and then it clicked with them. I really liked that feeling. And so I kind of just explored that. Teach for America was an opportunity. I knew I could get my licensure, and that was something that I was excited about, that this was an opportunity to do that outside of going back to school. I guess I should clarify. I still went to school. I went after class or after the school day, but I didn't have to go back and do a whole other program to get my licensure. So that's kind of what pushed me and kind of made me decide to do TFA.
I'd say I was motivated by a lot of similar reasons to what you both have said. My parents did do JVC, both of them, so I had familiarity with the program, and likewise had been in a lot of the service-oriented programs at BC. Had really enjoyed them, found them fulfilling. And thought a great way to start my post-grad career would be to give back, do some service at an organization that was, really excellent. But I think also there was a part of me that found that year of service was very attractive. I'm from Boston. I got to go live somewhere else. That was really cool. Like moving across the country in a very structured way. Like they set up my housing, they set up my program. When it ended, I could come back here. Taking a job somewhere else, it's a bit more permanent, a bit more sort of real. So I loved that part, and in a way, it was sort of like a one-year program to start you into your career as like a jump start. Like it was a one-year program. The people employing me knew the point of the program. They gave me much more hands-on experiences than you might get as just a run-of-the-mill first year somewhere. So I think I got a lot more insight into the whole profession because I was part of this structured program. And it left a lot of doors open. When you finish the program, you sort of get a redo of being that senior in the chair wondering what your career is going to be. Might be hard. I guess you're finding 2 jobs in 2 years instead, but I loved that it gave me some flexibility and was able to, after that year, really use that year to help decide what I wanted to do and then use a more targeted job search when I finished.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that kind of goes into my second question about the transition and how you said there's a structured kind of path for you to go somewhere different and also give you the experiences that are necessary for your next step and how that guided you. But I guess for Inez and Tess, how did your service program offer a transition out from going from IS at BC and then to your next career or what you're currently doing?
like from our year of service out
Yeah,
into
like
the
how
next
was
step.
this service like a good transit? What was your transition like? What kind of things that, or did you learn that helped you kind of be where you are right now?
Yeah, one of the reasons I picked Amate specifically was because I really liked how much support was built into like this program specifically. I think it's a pretty unique program. You live in this old convent, and the bottom level of the convent are actually all our staff's offices that come in like once or twice a week. But we would have once a week dinners with all of our house, but also all of the staff that worked for Amate, and they were really supportive in like getting us to think on those questions and like, what are you interested in? Some people came in knowing that they were applying for med school and that they had their set plan. Other people were like, I have no clue what I am doing after this, and like, I want to test out some things. So Amate specifically set me up with professional mentors. We had a lot of like different fundraising events where we were really like in Chicago, so we were able to connect with people that knew Amate, and everyone is so willing. I mean, you're doing a year of service. So many people are willing to talk to you about their careers and what they're doing, whether that's alumni or people that have some sort of like other connection of the program. So like, they did definitely try to set us up to have that kind of like professional leadership development that was very structured and was really one of the big reasons why I wanted to do that program specifically. We also got an AmeriCorps scholarship right at the end, which I was very glad for. Our program like really fought to get us an AmeriCorps scholarship, which ended up helping pay for grad school, which is what I'm doing now. I'm at BC getting my master's, so I'm back to being a double eagle, which is great. So that was really helpful. But yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, pretty similarly, it was the community that really helped me transition. It was really wonderful to be surrounded by 80 plus people in Nashville, and then there was more people in Tennessee that really shared the same core values that I did. I mean, you know, everyone's different, but for the most part, everyone thought very similarly to me in terms of like why education was important. We had different backgrounds and different perspectives, and were able to really converse about these things, but at our core, we shared very similar values. So that was really helpful with the transition. I also think teaching in general, you are thrown in a lot of ways to a leadership position. You have to be creative, you have to adjust, you have to adapt. You are working with administration and other people in education leadership positions all the time. So it's one of those roles that you're really gonna learn so many transferable skills. I use them every day, and I'm very thankful for that. And through doing it with TFA, and it's all dependent on where you end up or what school you're at, you are getting that built-in mentorship as well. So I had a mentor come to my classroom. They were engaging with me, working with me weekly so that I would become a better teacher. But again, that all depends on the classroom that you're in. Similarly to Marcus, I had grown up here. I'm from here. I went to Boston College here, and it was really a great experience to go somewhere else and really learn about that community. When you're interacting with kids every single day, you learn so much about them and their families and the community that they live in, and I lived in that same community. And I just felt so embraced by them, by my co-teachers, by their families, and just really felt like I was immersed. And I think, not to like start a comparison game with people that didn't do service after graduation, but most of my friends didn't do service. I think something that I had was an identity that I was able to form outside of Boston College. I was a teacher. I was someone who, like, it's kind of hard to explain, but I think I was really able to find myself outside of who I was at BC, and I think that was very different for people who maybe stayed around here or went to New York and did business. I mean, everyone's finding themselves, but I think it was really helpful to have that organization to guide who I was post-graduation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we can start with Marcus if this works. But what was your application process like in each, and because you three went to very different programs, so first, like, how did you find this program through BC? We have these VSLC like programs or like networking events that the Career Center has, but did you personally have to go out of your way to find someone like an advisor, and then when you were doing the application, like, what was it like? What was the process?
Sure. I'm gonna add one thought on your last question first, and
absolutely,
then
please. Thank you.
the application. Just final thought on how the program helped me transition out of IS, the program, and sort of into the real world, but staying involved and staying engaged in the material of IS. I forget which professor said it. It might have been Professor Owens, but they said
If
one
it's
of the,
good, maybe.
If it was good, so it must have been. They said, one of the best ways to stay involved and stay engaged with IS as you graduate is to just keep reading the news, keep learning things, and keep being open to experiences. Must have been.
Yeah.
It's something I would say, whether or not it was me. Yeah.
So I know Amate is the same way, and I guess I don't know about TFA, but in your house in the community of JVC, there's 5 other people or 4 other people that are doing different jobs, and you learn about all their jobs too. And so I thought that was very cool, because if you start a job here, you might ask your friends about their jobs outside of service, but probably less in depth, probably less intentionally. And I thought it was really useful to hear about their experiences, hear about the challenges their clients were facing that were different than my clients were facing. Sometimes it'd be sort of in conflict. Two of my housemates worked with formerly incarcerated people. I worked with domestic violence victims. Like, it was tensions to it, and it was pulling at those tensions was, sort of a harkening back to the education realm of IS, and that was cool to have for that year. For the application, I think there was a service fair, and JVC was there. JVC's got a pretty centralized application system. I did not speak with an advisor other than whoever was at like the service fair table here at BC, but they were pretty helpful, and I do believe I spoke to some prior BC students who had done JVC. If you're thinking of or are applying to JVC specifically, I remember the application was a lot longer than I thought, and maybe I was just procrastinating, and I would give you the advice to start it a little earlier, because as I clicked through, I thought it was about to be over, and then there were supplement questions I wasn't expecting, and all these things, so definitely start it earlier. And the last thing on the JVC app specifically, I guess, is just know that you apply to the program first, and then you will separately sort of apply, or I guess you sort of put in your name for specific jobs. So there are sort of those 2 steps. In the first, you're just applying to the program very intentionally, and then separately you'll look for your placement. And so it's sort of a 2-step game, but once you're in the program, which is step 1, they are going to find you a placement. So that's sort of second step's a lot less stressful, even though I remember it being stressful knowing I was accepted and going somewhere, but I didn't know where yet. So that was the application process for me.
And then for me, I remember this until you said this. I was in a Ruth A group, and someone older than me was doing TFA, and I thought she was really cool. So then I was like, I should look into this, and she was actually an IS student as well. So that's how I was introduced to TFA. And then I think I just looked online, and then you could connect with someone. TFA is it's a bigger program. So there's lots and lots of people. And so they have like a TFA Massachusetts office that you can connect with. But the application is also pretty lengthy. I actually applied junior year, so I knew that I was accepted and where I was going before I even started senior year, which for me was something that helped a lot with my senior experience, but you can still apply your senior year. There's multiple application deadlines. But if it's something that you're interested in, it might be worthwhile to do when you are a junior, which is what I did when I was abroad, actually. But there's a couple of different steps. The first step is that you'll write a few essays, and then your resume, transcript, and then recommendation letters. And then after, if you get accepted, you're then invited to an in-person or virtual. I think now it's probably all virtual, I don't know. Interview. There's multiple components to that. There's a case study where they basically will give you a scenario in the classroom, and they have to see how you would react to that. You also have to do a 5-minute lesson, which goes very quickly. It's very hard to teach something in 5 minutes. But then the other interviewees will act as your students, then you'll be a student for them. And then there's a 90-minute in-person behavioral interview when you're speaking with people from the TFA office. Then after that, if you move on, that's when you can pick you can rank perhaps where you want to go. I think that's a little bit differently right now, but I ranked Nashville as number 1. I got it. And then you also can rank different subjects. I ranked social studies just with the IS connection. I ended up getting it. And then you kind of know from there. One thing I'll add is that you do have housing for the first summer. You do an institute of sorts when you're teaching summer school. Every single day, they provide housing for you to help you get settled, find a place to live, figure out where you're going to be working, etc. So that's the TFA process. You then also have to get a job. So TFA then helps you to interview with schools. Slightly different than maybe their traditional interview process, but then after I got accepted, I had to interview with schools and find a best fit there. But most people, I'm pretty sure it's like 99% of people who get into TFA will get a job somewhere. So very lengthy.
Yeah, I think my process is a little bit more chill, but a little bit similar to JVC as well. I think Amate really tries to just make sure that you're a good fit for their program and like what the intention is behind you wanting to do that year of service. I remember meeting with someone initially, the recruiter who you get to know very, very well because it's a very small program. It's a max of like 13 of you that are gonna end up doing it, which sounds really selective, but it really isn't because it's a pretty niche program that not a lot of people find out about. Because I remember getting on their website and being like, oh my gosh, there's only like 12 people that are in this program, and they were like, no, like please apply. So the process was much more like, why are you interested in Amate? Let's have like a phone call and talk and see if this is maybe a good fit. And then if it is a good fit, they invite you to apply. And you do a short 2-part application. And then you do a normal like behavioral interview. And then once all of that is through, you have some more conversations face to face with the people that work at Amate to try to gauge what types of service placement sites you would be interested in, and then you kind of embark on that process where they're really hands-on about connecting you with different places that could be a good fit for you. But you already know where you're going to be because the only location is Chicago, and there's a really wide variety of service sites that you could work at. So it's a very person-oriented process of applying. They like really, really get to know you through it, which I really liked because I felt like I could tell the person that I was talking to, like, I felt like they really got to know me and what would maybe be a good fit for me, and if this program was a good fit for me, because the last thing you want to do is sign on to do a year-long program and get there and be like, this actually isn't the right fit. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have more questions, but I just wanted to open it up to see if you guys like halfway through have any questions, some guiding, just based off of what they've said so far. Totally fine, no pressure. I can keep asking, but I didn't want to like be the only one talking. So, and since you guys are here, do you have any questions? Or yeah.
For the JVP and the Amate House, did you apply to other programs as well, and like how, or just the one, and how did that timeline work in terms of committing to one?
I can start. I applied to Amate House actually as well, and I think I applied to JVC Northwest, which is very, very similar to JVC, but they're separate. They kept themselves sort of their own organization. I think the timelines were quite similar in terms of when the applications were due, when the interviews were going on. I do remember I was sort of ultimately I was between the two and chose JVC because I wanted to go to LA, and so the program is very similar. They both offer unique things about themselves, but I do remember the timelines were pretty flexible in terms of if you get an offer from both of the programs are sort of willing to wait and let you make your decision within reason. I think I had, a week or two once I got both to make my choice. But I was looking at a few, and they were pretty helpful along the way.
Yeah. So I meant to apply to JVC, and then I saw how long the application was. I also ended up feeling like Amate was a better fit. I also am a procrastinator, so I didn't apply until like April, which I don't do that. I don't recommend. If you think that this is something that you're interested in, it's always better to kind of toss those applications in early, especially because it's kind of a first come first served basis for I think both JVC and Amate. So it's a rolling acceptance, which means that the sooner you apply, the more options you have to be placed somewhere. That being said, I went to apply in April and I was like, I'm so late, and they were like, it's totally fine, you have time to figure this out still. And I think my last housemate actually applied at the end of June. That was a very last minute application, but it is kind of helpful if you're thinking of applying to multiple programs to apply at the same time, because then you can kind of compare the options that you have in terms of you'll probably end up getting options for service sites around the same time, and then you can compare would I rather work with this population or would I rather do this sort of job? So I think that it's helpful to line those up as best you can.
Okay, so I'll continue. I guess we can go more into your experiences in these programs, and specifically if you can you discuss some challenges that you had during your time doing this program, or positive experience, any kind of experience, both the good and the bad.
I can start. I don't want to make you always start. Overall I had a phenomenal experience with the program. The placement I had was, I got lucky. It was sort of exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to do a legal job within my year of service, because one of the things I was figuring out is, do I actually want to go to law school, spend all that time and money to go be a lawyer? I wanted to make sure it was something I liked, and so I wanted to work in a legal setting, and I got to do that. In terms of challenging experiences, I think the work you do in a lot of these placements will be far more emotionally tolling than a lot of other first-year jobs, in a sort of fulfilling but hard way. I worked with mostly domestic violence victims. They were often almost always going to court, either getting restraining orders or divorce from the person, their abuser. I would sit with them in interviews, take their sort of statement of what happened, what this abuse looked like, what the relationship looked like, and then write it up in a personal statement with them. You take those stories home, they affect you, you hear them, each one is unique, each one is hard. And so that is different than being a paralegal at somewhere else. Ultimately, it helped me decide family law wasn't what I wanted to do. That was really challenging. I have a lot of admiration for the people that do that, but that work, I was able to discern in the year that wasn't my calling directly, but I did love the way in which the law helped these people get access to things that they couldn't otherwise. Quickly, separately, the program itself also presents challenges that are different. Our program put us on pretty meager funds. We had $100 each in grocery funds and $100 personal funds. That was tough to live on, but it was intentional to make you sort of understand the limits that a lot of your clients will face. And you also live with 5 random people. I became incredibly good friends with most of my housemates. I had a housemate who was really challenging to live with, and that was a challenging living, growing experience as well, that to a lesser extent as you move on in your career. Now, when I have a tough coworker or colleague, it is so easy to deal with compared to living with someone, being in community with someone that you struggle to get along with. It sort of helps you learn that lesson very quickly. And also just becoming friends with 5 people. But yeah, the work, living with those people, living in a new place, the positive experiences vastly outnumber the negative ones, and even the negative ones were real learning moments.
I could talk about this for a very long time, so I'm gonna try to be as brief as possible and just give the highlights. I think I want to start by saying that TFA was probably the hardest thing. I know it is the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. I can't anticipate where my life will be going, but I do hope that it probably will remain the hardest thing I will ever have done in my life. But that being said, I do not regret doing it, and I am very grateful for the experiences that I had and the path that it has put me on. I'll start with the challenges and end with the positive. So the challenges, there's too many to even name them all. I'm sure some of you are very familiar with the state of the education system in our country. I'm working in some of the, most under-resourced schools in the country. So I was working in Nashville in a community at a charter school specifically. So each TFA placement brings its own challenges, and I can only speak to my experience. Everyone might have a different experience. Some people have really positive TFA experiences, some have very negative. I would say I'm a little bit in between. I had a very difficult time kind of navigating my values and what I thought a school should be doing and what my school was actually doing. And that was the hardest thing for me, was trying to navigate how to teach a curriculum that I didn't necessarily agree with, or work with many colleagues who were treating kids in ways that I did not agree with, but they're my bosses, they're my managers. So I very quickly had to learn how to advocate for myself, advocate for my students, while also keeping my job and doing what I was supposed to be doing. And that's a very hard line to toe. I'll just give an example. I was an ancient civilizations teacher for 6th grade, and one of the units that we had to teach was ancient Israel. I was teaching in Nashville, Tennessee. I had a very unique group of students. I had a lot of Kurdish students who were Muslim. I had a lot of Coptic Christian students from Egypt who were Christian. I had a lot of Baptist students from Nashville, Tennessee, Black students. It was a very diverse group. That was beautiful in so many ways, and I loved being able to do that. But as you can imagine, I was told I had to teach an ancient Israel unit. I was teaching world religion, so I had to teach Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, and teaching some of the beginnings of our world, which I think is very cool. But as you can imagine, all of these students are coming from such different backgrounds, and they have such different opinions or beliefs, and their parents have even stronger opinions and beliefs in many ways. And then the admin also have their own opinions and beliefs. So really navigating all of those stakeholders while also trying to stay true to who I was very challenging. I later, if you're interested, can tell you how I resolved that challenge, for example. But that's just one of the many challenges that I faced. In addition to that, you are not only a teacher, but you are a therapist and you are a mentor. I was on phone calling parents every evening, parents and families. I was talking to my coworkers about how we were gonna address this behavioral kind of challenge with a child. Like, you are just on, kind of like you were saying, every day and every evening, and it's very, very hard to make time for yourself. There's just not enough time in the day. I think I calculated it. My first couple months of teaching, I was working 80 plus hours a week, and you're not getting paid nearly enough for the work that you're doing. It gets easier with time, and you learn, and you grow. I can talk about that for a very long time if you're interested and have questions. But the positives are the relationships that you build. Truly, I still get emotional. Like, I went to my students' 8th grade graduation 2 years ago, and I'm still connected to a lot of my students. And it is just so cool to see the kids that you teach grow up and learn things. And especially in the middle school era, they're learning what empathy is. And I don't know if you've ever had a kid or seen someone learn what empathy is. That's the coolest thing, in my opinion. Like, to watch it click in their mind that, oh, I should be thinking about this person because of this, and I actually went through that experience as well, and then they tell you it, and they get really excited, and they want to share. That's just the most amazing experience, and I still have students text me or message me saying, Ms. Murphy, I just want to let you know that that book that you gave me in the 6th grade, and they're in high school now, which is like my favorite book, and it's like the reason I read today. Like you truly get those messages, and it's just such a reminder of why you go through all the challenges that you go through. So.
I totally relate to your middle school vibe. I did not go into Amate thinking that I would ever end up doing the service site that I did end up doing. I actually had a friend at BC that had gotten their placement site before and was also working at a different middle school, and I was like, that sucks for you, middle schoolers are so hard. And then they were like, you're going to be working with 5th through 7th grade, and I was like, amazing, I take it all back. I think the challenges that struck me the most were the realities of what working in a nonprofit really are. I think sometimes in theory it sounds like it can be a lot of fun, and it can be, but there are a lot of challenges structurally that come with it, in terms of in my experience, a lot of people in my division were not sticking around for a super long time. I was having to make up a lot of my own supervision and my own path and my own curriculum for 75 students, which was not what I had maybe signed up for or had been told would be happening. So there was definitely a lot of challenges of adapting to that, but it taught me a lot about how to be a better person in the workplace, and I think I was able to use a lot of things that BC had taught me about just being able to put skills that I had never thought that I would translate into middle school, things that I learned on retreats here. I was trying to, how do I make this a 5th grade level? So that was one challenge that I faced. I think another one was kind of really trying to understand the realities of my students' lives and the communities that we were working with, and kind of echoing what you've both said, it really does stick with you, because I was lucky enough to live in the same zip code as my students, so I really did have an understanding of their community, but I also hadn't grown up there, and a lot of them have lived there for generations, and seeing a lot of things that I was like, oh my gosh, this is really shocking. And to a 13-year-old, it was a normal day of the week was really challenging at times, which is why I think it was also really nice to have such a supportive community of people that were at different times also experiencing similar challenges at different service sites with completely different populations. A lot of my housemates worked at an asylum center where they were working with a lot of international people that were seeking asylum in the US because they were victims of torture. So they were coming in and they had completely different stories, but I could share about, what I was experiencing, and there's a lot of people to kind of help you carry that weight, which is a very unique growing opportunity. I'd say one of the big positives was in having that community, we were all on the same page. And I think it's a really unique thing to have everyone in your house, everyone that you're living with, be on the same budget, the same ideas, the same plan. So we get up each weekend and we say, what can we do for no money in Chicago? And it taught me to be very resourceful and to really appreciate a lot of the little things in life that I think I was like, oh, this has never happened before. We really all are kind of living a similar experience, and even with best friends and roommates that I'd lived with at BC, just it's not typically like that. So I think that was one of my favorite parts of the year, was just how creative we were able to be.
Yeah.
What kind of school were you in?
I was at 5 different Chicago public schools.
Wow.
So I'd run the program at a different school each day of the week and then rotate.
I mean, at BC we learned, being people for others and serving, and that's what you three did, and dedicating your time on your experiences to do service post-grad, and you were serving others, but you also had to take care of yourself while also being put into these programs in different communities and helping others. What did you do to take care of yourself, or to put a little bit of time? Like Tess, you mentioned a little bit how you said you were working 80 hours and barely had time for yourself, but even within just 15 minutes, or if we do go into service programs and post-grad, that's something to think about, and to really not be so hard on ourselves, because it can be demanding and it can be hard because you're putting yourself to serve others. So do you have any advice on that, or what personal experiences of what you did, whether it's meditation or just sitting in silence for a little bit? Or
Yeah, I can start because I know you two have been starting. It's like a learning curve, right? You have to really figure it out as you go. I would say therapy was really important for me. Like, I was going once a week, and I needed that. I mean, when you are working with a community that is constantly talking about their trauma and what they're going through, you need to also process and talk about it. So that was one big thing. And then community is just really important. Something I'd add is that doing these programs, right, there's built-in community and people going through very similar experiences that you are. I am still very, very connected to the people that I met and taught with in Nashville. Like, they are my best friends to this day. And we just really had to lean on each other during that time. I'm trying to think of kind of some other big ones, but I think I just had to be really honest with myself and like my family and my friends that were here and in New York, being like, hey, I am not my best self right now. And I said that many times, like, when they would try to get in contact with me, or they're like, hey, we should go on this like trip somewhere, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, I can't really do that. But just having to be really honest with them, be like, hey, this is the place I'm in. As hard as it was, it helped me to really realize who my friends for life were. Like, during that period, the people that stuck around and that were there for me and supported me are the people that are still here to this day, and for that, I'm very, very grateful.
I can go next. I think that I got I guess in part I got very lucky. I had a really, really great boss, and that's, with any job, sort of an amazing thing to have. But my boss was very good at checking in with me and asking sort of not unprofessional, certainly when it's in a spot like that, but like, how are you doing? How are you being affected by these stories? Is this too much? Do you need a break? Do you want to go in on this meeting? Do you want to keep working on this case? And I think she taught me and pushed me to self-advocate more than I was probably going to do on my own if she had not been there as a first, brand new out of college employee, and I think that was helpful. And I wish I had been more willing to do it myself. And I would say, particularly, it sounds like other placements might not have that sort of structure and a boss who is right there sort of shielding you from some of it. And I would say that one of the things you can do is advocate and tell your placement, tell your employers, tell your housemates what you need. JVC had some built-in, I think 2 nights a week were sort of structured programming, sort of led by your housemates, where you would reflect on sort of one of the programs was reflecting on your day in, day out, how is this week going, and one is reflecting on sort of larger themes and ideas of the program. I thought those were super helpful because you could, there was no like outside mentor, so it was just the 5 of us in the house, and I could tell them like, hey, actually this week has been really hard, I might be pretty quiet tonight at the thing. Or if I know someone else's week has been hard, you can sort of make space for them. You can be there and support them in the way that they need you to. I think knowing, you mentioned about the friends here and friends that don't do service, they're having very unique post-grad experiences too, but it's not going to be what yours is. And the people in your program are having much more similar experiences to you than your friends at home. And that was helpful, knowing that, sure, they didn't have exactly the same experience as me, but they know what it's like to have someone come to you at work and tell you a story that was unimaginable at a place like Boston College. And so that was really helpful to have those people being like, yeah, I also got a really traumatic story told to me, or had to work with a client who was just going through living hell. And so it was really helpful that those people were there too. Yeah, and self-care, particularly if you're going somewhere new, like explore the place you're going. I know there are financial resource limitations. There are not many free things to do in LA. I think we found all of them. But like, if you're there for a year, do find a moment to go and explore the place you are, because living somewhere new in your early 20s is a lot of fun. And that was a big form of self-care, was going to the beaches in LA, going on the hikes in LA. And I think that was a really useful thing to step out and also have your own life still, even while you're doing that service.
I think my last note would just be like advocate for yourself, and that can be really hard, especially if you haven't had to do that in like a professional setting before. But it's really important that if things are not maybe like aligning with what you need and like what you need to be well, then advocating for yourself is like the number one thing. We were really lucky at Amate that our staff was so hands-on in a way, because they also served as advocates for us when we were put in tough positions of like, hey, can you work all these like crazy hours or take on this other extra thing? Like having someone that was there outside of our house where other people were maybe like, yeah, I'm also doing all this crazy stuff for my placement, having someone else that was like, hey, so you actually like they shouldn't be asking you to do that, and we're gonna tell them that they can't make you do that, was very helpful to have someone to be like, you guys should speak up, and kind of giving you the courage to do that. But I was very lucky in my placement. I felt like I was working with a lot of social workers that had a very good kind of like boundaries set with our work. So that, and also like getting to talk to people that aren't in your program but are also doing a year of service or have done something similar that like get it, is a really great outlet. So
Yeah, absolutely. One more chance. I want to open it up just in case if you guys have any more questions, or if you have any questions. Yeah. And then
Yeah, I was curious as far as your experience at TFA, like how did you reckon with that kind of tension between your morals and then what you were being asked to do?
Yeah. It was really hard. I think I, at the end of the day, was really proud of myself for staying true to who I was. And for example, just like one of the standards was that I had to teach that the KKK was a vigilante justice system in the social studies class that I taught for 5th grade, which was U.S. history. And like that's just something I'm not okay with. And I went to my admin and I was like, hey, this is not something that I'm comfortable teaching. Here's one or two different ideas that I can bring to the table and how we're going to address it. And most people are usually pretty open to trying to be creative and trying to change things. So for that example, they were like, well, we have to teach the standard because it's going to be on the state test. And I was like, okay, well, how about I put the standard in front of them and they tell me what they think about the standard? And that was the compromise that we came to, was that they saw the KKK vigilante justice system, and I said, okay, what did the KKK do? We learned about that. What's vigilante justice? Are those two things similar in your head? And all the kids were like, no. And I was like, great, we learned what I wanted you to learn, but you still were taught the standard. So you have to get very creative and bring different solutions. For example, the one that I was talking about earlier, I basically had to rewrite an entire curriculum, and that takes a lot of time and energy, but it was really important to me that kids learned about world religions. My admin came to me and said, shred all the lessons that you created about Islam, and I said, oh. Because they were really nervous that it was going to be sent home, and then that was going to create some sort of discourse. And I was like, hey, I'm not comfortable with not teaching this in my class. This is really important. And so I had to create an entire world religions curriculum from scratch. That takes a lot of time and energy, and you have to get really creative and lean on people. And I was calling people and I was like, hey, do you have this resource? Do you have that? This is free online. And you really find your people that will stand by your side. There's always someone. You're never alone. answer your question though, the older that I've gotten and the more that I've been in the education system, sometimes you have to let things go. You have to say, this isn't a priority and this is not something that is very important to me right now in this moment, and so I'm gonna let it slide, because you're not gonna win every fight, and you have to protect your energy, and I've gotten much better at that. I think at 22, I was like, I'm going to change the world. Like, I'm gonna stick to all my morals. Now I've figured out that that's not always gonna be the case. But does that kind of answer your question a bit? Okay.
Also, could I ask a quick follow-up?
Oh yeah, please.
How did you deal with like the parents? You mentioned you had to talk to them often. Like,
Yeah.
when you hear different opinions coming from the homes as to like what they want their child being taught or what
Yeah.
they think is right, how did you kind of deal with trying to not have a bunch of unhappy parents?
Yeah, that's such a good question. There will always be some unhappy parents, but I think it's a foundation. You have to build a foundation of trust and communication. I wasn't as good at it my first or second year. My third year, I got a lot better at it. I think it's hard because in TFA you're really thrown in without any sort of education prep program, so you're learning as you go. But I would say in my third year, something that I did really successfully was I created a pamphlet of all the things that I was going to cover within the year, and when the parents came in, I gave it to them, and I also sent it to them, and I said, if you have a question now, come to me, and let's talk about it. And that really helped to get a lot of it out of the way. If there was a certain book that I was, teaching that they weren't comfortable with, or this and that. I think you also just really have to lean on your administration and figure it out. You work in a public school, so I did have a few kids who sat out some lessons. Like, you're not going to win it all, And some parents, at the end of the day, have a say in what their child learns, and so you work with what you have. I would say something that was really important, especially if I was having a child that, behaviorally it was more challenging, was just being very consistent about calls. So even if it was one email during the day to a family member being like, hey, so-and-so did this really well. And it's something very simple. It's like building that constant communication and trust over time that kind of won them over. And they're like, oh, Miss Murphy gets my kid, or she's willing to put in the time and energy. So does that answer?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Ava, did you have a question?
Oh yeah, I guess you guys have kind of touched on this a little bit, but what was a day in your life, in your service like typical day for you guys?
Yeah, I could start. I would usually just get up. I had a car through Amate, which was very rare for a year of service program. A lot of them rely solely on public transportation, but we were lucky enough to have a couple of very old donated cars. I was in charge of transportation, so I got to give everyone gas money at the beginning of every week. And I'd go to my office, I'd have a couple of meetings, I'd set up curriculum. My office was really fun because I had hula hoops and paint and tie-dye and all of this stuff, and I would do a lot of planning for the week. We ran a lot of field trips, so if we had a field trip coming up, I would plan that and call different bus companies and things like that, call parents. If we had things going on with different students. I also worked really closely with the school counselors, so setting up meetings with school counselors to do check-ins and things like that. And then the end of the school day would roll around, I would drive. I worked at 5 middle schools, but they were all within a 1 mile radius of each other, which felt like a lot. I was like, there's a lot of middle schools in this one area. And I would go and I would spend an hour with students doing whatever our lesson was for that day, which was a lot of fun. And then, because it was I was like, well, I'm by myself most of the day, and then I am spending my time with middle schoolers, so it made me a way more interesting person. And then when I would get back home, we would all cook for each other. So I would typically be paired up with someone from my house to have family dinner, and we'd come up with very creative dinners. I learned how to make vegan lasagna, if anyone is ever interested in having that. I was really proud of my recipe for that, and we would do that, and then we'd usually spend some time at night either watching Survivor, or if we had some built-in programming, we would either have like a community night or a spirituality night where we would have like some sort of reflection.
One last piece about the parents and families that I thought of was that I would tell the families and parents, it's not my job to tell your kids what to think. It's my job to give them all the information and then they form their opinion. And that's a very helpful angle when talking to parents and families. So that's something that I utilized. In terms of my day-to-day, it starts very early, 6:45. I had to be ready to talk with all my other teachers and admin. I taught about 5 classes every single day. My first year, I had 240 students. I should have 1 prep period a day. Big emphasis on the should. My last year, I had 2. That was very fun. Really loved that. Having that ability to like work on my lessons during that time and print and do all the things that I needed for the next day. But often when you're working in these schools, there's so much that needs to happen that you're pulled during those free periods to help support other teachers or to monitor this space and do that. So yeah. And then you have professional development a few times a week. But the nice thing about working at a school is you should get out around 2:45, 3. If you're in professional development, it goes a little bit longer, but then, especially during my first few years, you are grading, you are talking to parents and families, you are helping, you are getting ready for your lesson tomorrow, and that does bleed into the weekends.
During the weeks, I would say that, so my placement was a pretty typical 9 to 5. So were, I would say, half my housemates, and then a few had sort of after school activities, so they were more like an 11 or noon through some of the later hours. But I, tended to get up. We would do breakfast mostly on our own among the housemates, and then I took the, surprisingly in LA, I took the public transit. There was a train to work. And then at work, it would vary. I would say probably 80% of the time I was in the office itself. And then 20% of the time I was at, usually following my boss to whatever court she was off to. So they did the whole county, which was cool. I got to sort of see all of LA by going to various courthouses where they were filing. After work, my boss was, I mentioned earlier, she was fantastic. One of the things she was great at was protecting my hours and saying, no, it's 5:30 now, you can go because you're an unpaid employee and you work 9 to 5. So she was really good at helping me stay on that time, which I'm grateful for because it let me do, part of the reason JVC pushes that, by the way, they want to protect your time because if you're working 80 hours, you can't engage in all the other parts of the program. So they are a place that's helpful at protecting your hours at work so that you can do the other pieces. In the evenings, I think, I was surprised that a lot of it is it's still your time. Like, we had a community night, it was about an hour and a half. We also did community dinners where someone would cook, or maybe 2 people would cook for everyone. That's awesome. I mean, you get to eat every night. It's a naturally built-in check-in. It's also the only way you can make the grocery budgets stretch. And so, but sort of before dinner, after dinner, if you want to go for a run, if you want to go out and read your book, you can do that. You can do your own thing. If sort of a diehard Celtics fan, so like when the Celtics run, I'm like, I'm gonna go watch the game, or I'll put it on here if you all want to watch. I found it very open, inclusive, but not expected that you would always be with your housemates. So if you wanted to go off and do your own thing, you could, but your housemates, I found, were always inviting you in to do something too. So it was nice in that, like college, there's sort of people there to hang out with you. But I certainly didn't feel like my days were 24/7 structured by other people. There was still an ability to spend my time in the afternoons as I wanted to.
Thank you guys so much. This has been really cool. Now that you're moved on to a different phase in life, doing something else, more school, professional lives, etc., how would you look back and say that experience has shaped your worldview?
I can start. JVC, I don't know if they still use it. They have a tagline I think they still do. They're not paying me to say it, I swear. They call it Ruined for Life, which I think is a bit dramatic, probably intentionally so, in that I don't think I came out ruined. I don't think I came out destroyed or anything, but I do think it ruins a certain viewpoint of life that you can sort of, that like these things don't happen and that people's lives are not as hard as some people's lives are. I think I am really grateful for the program because my career has taken me sort of away from direct client service at the moment, into sort of, I consider when I was at the government, that is still public service. I think that those were really useful cases that were being brought. I worked at the SEC for a little bit in law school. It's somewhere I'd love to work in the future. I think it helped broaden my view of service, but I also do think it makes it very real to experience direct service on a daily basis and to understand, when you intern somewhere or when you volunteer somewhere a few hours a week, you go home then and the people that work there continue working there. And I think while I was there, I really realized how full a full work day of direct service is and how much happens. And I think it reminds me both in my current work now to stay as dedicated to whatever work I'm doing, but also to step away from the work I have and to find other ways to remain engaged in the communities that I served. I'm going to have the chance to do a lot of pro bono, and I'm going to use that. I think JVC will really shine through there, and the types of pro bono cases I want to take, the types of practice I want to do. But I think this is probably the clearest way. I watched some, because we would have pro bono attorneys from big law firms come and help, and some of them viewed it like an excellent way for them to get into the courtroom and an excellent way for them to get experience for themselves. And others viewed it as people who really need their help getting their help. And I would much rather approach it the second way. And even if you don't go and work at one of these nonprofits full time, I think it's a great angle into seeing that when you have a moment to do this work, to do it the right way, and to see that, it's not all about you getting the experience or doing this. You're there to help them and to do it as best and fully as you can.
For me, it's changed my whole perspective on my life and the world as I see it. And I'll clarify that a bit, but I'm now working in education policy and I plan to continue to do that for a majority of my life or in some sort of connection to education policy. But I guess, right, I'm at a much higher level right now thinking about the entire state of Massachusetts, all the schools and districts, but my experience made me, I believe, a semi-expert in what goes on in schools. As you can tell, I really like speaking to it. It really fires me up. I truly believe that school should be a positive experience for every single kid that goes through the school system. I had a really positive school experience, and that's just, my experience is something that I take with me, and it really drives kind of like my set of values. With that being said, I think TFA, no matter if you stay in education or not, is going to impact the way you think about the world, because everything is connected to school. Everything's connected to education. I would say most of my friends that were in TFA are still in some sort of education adjacent job, but those that aren't, they're lawyers or they're doctors or even people in the business world, like they think about their experience and connect it in some way. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think like whatever service you do does not put you on, like, you could do one thing and learn so much and then decide that you want to go a different route. I think for me, like, IS was so cool because I got to learn so much about all of these different things that were going on in the world and get such a global perspective, and then this was my opportunity to kind of put up a magnifying glass to so much and have the opportunity to like have a real understanding within like a community that I was new to, but like was still within the US and I had some like context too. I mean, we were working with tons of international students and families and having the background of like, oh, I actually know what's going on in like your home country, or like the knowledge of not just like the student is struggling, but like the beyond that, I think was very cool, and it made me want to take that into the rest of the work that I do, like no matter what that is. Like I think having a much wider lens of the context beyond just what's right in front of you is something that doing a year of service like solidified for me.
No, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. This is really important and makes a huge impact for us who are also thinking about service post-grad. And also thank you for everything you've done through Amata House and Teach for America and JVC. It really makes a difference. And then also thank you for coming. That's the most important part. We're just very glad to have you all here. And yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.